So good morning. Today's daf is Yevamot daf Yudchet. Yesterday, we introduced the concept of Zika, although we indirectly referenced it previously. Zika refers to the connection that exists between the widow of the brother who dies without children. So we've been using Ruvain as the name for that oldest brother. And so his widow, and for alliteration purposes, we've been calling her Rachel. So his widow, Rachel, has a relationship, a Zika relationship with the surviving brothers. And there's no question that Zika relationship has legal ramifications. She's not allowed to marry anyone else, anyone other than the brothers while she has that relationship. And that relationship will either end with one of the brothers performing Yibum, or with one of the brothers performing Chalitza to separate it. So that's the nature that's sort of like the definitional almost nature of the Zika relationship. And we saw that according to Rav Huna, in the name of Rav, we say Ein Zika, meaning that the relation is more limited. So if the widow dies, there's no prohibition for a brother to marry the widow, marry the mother of the widow. So again, Reuven was married to Rachel. Rachel's mom is Sarah. Now Reuven has died. Shimon is not allowed to marry Sarah, Rachel's mom, as long as Rachel is alive, and because he now has a Zika relationship with her, and he can't undermine that relationship by marrying her mother, because if Shimon were to marry Sarah, then all of a sudden now he can no longer do Yibum or Chalitza with Sarah's daughter Rachel, because that would be one of the prohibitions that we talked about in the Mishnah. So that is, in the first Mishnah of Maseches Yevamos. So he would not be allowed to marry her, and she would just go out. And that would be effectively, as we saw, nullifying the mitzvah of Yibum. And then, so again, but if Rachel dies, so then, according to Rav Huna, there's no prohibition for a brother to marry the mother of the widow. And again, even Rav Huna would agree that the widow herself is sufficiently bound to the brothers that she may not marry anyone else. I mentioned that. And again, while the widow is alive, the brothers may not marry the widow's mother or sister, because that would prevent that brother from performing Yibum or Chalitza. So now we're ready to turn to the opposite view, the view of Rav Yehuda, who says Yesh Zika. And so we begin 6 lines up from the bottom of Yud Zayin Amud Bet. Second to last word on the line is V'Rav Yehuda. V'Rav Yehuda Amar Shomeres Yabam Shemesa Asur Be'ima. Again, that even if Rachel were to die, the Yavam, the Shimon, is forbidden to marry her mother, because it's as if on some level there was a marriage relationship. And once there's a marriage relationship that a man has to a woman, that woman's mother is no longer allowed to marry the man. So Alma Kasavar Yesh Zika. So again, we see that Rav Yehuda holds Yesh Zika. V'lema halacha gedebrei Homer Yesh Zika. Well, 1 second. Why not just say it? Say it out. Say that Rav Yehuda should say that the halacha is like the person who says Yesh Zika, that there is a Zika bound. So a Zika connection. So Ihava Amar Hachi, because if he would have said that Hava Amina Hani Mili Bechad, that when is there a Zika? It's only when there's one brother. Aval betray Ein Zika. But when there are 2 brothers, because there are now multiple people who could do Yibum or Chalitza, so now the connection with any individual brother is less strict or less tight. And so that might mean that we would say Ein Zika in that situation. But in fact, Rav Yehuda wants to tell us that we say yesh zika even in that situation. Haki pligi betray pligi 1 second. But when there's this debate among the Tanaim in connection with this issue, they debate it regarding 2 brothers. So of course, if he's holding yesh zika, it means yesh zika in connection with 2 brothers. So Elai Amar Hachi, but rather, if you're going to say that this is the issue, so now we turn to Yudchet Amar Aleph, Haba Aminu Mechayim. So I might have thought that it was only while the widow was alive that the prohibition would exist to marry the mother. And I might have thought that, yes, there is a Zika relationship that we have between the brothers and the widow, namely all the brothers and Rachel. But as soon as Rachel dies, so now that relationship goes away, and it's as if it never existed. And so as a result, all the brothers would be able to marry, any of the brothers would be able to marry Rachel's mom, Sarah. And so as a result, that, but in fact, but after she dies, after Rachel dies, we would think that the Zika relationship went away. Kamash Malan. So that is why Rav Yehuda is specifically telling us the law about when the widow dies. That even when the widow dies, the Zika bichdei lo paka, that a woman that doesn't actually dissolve, that relationship does not go away, does not get destroyed or uprooted just because she passed away. And so as a result, even after she passes away, the brothers are not allowed to marry her mother. So lema misayeh. So why don't we say that the following Mishnah, the Mishnah that we're going to see on Daf Mem Tet Amud Aleph, why don't we say that that Mishnah is supportive of Rav Yehuda? And again, we had used yesterday this Mishnah in order to say that maybe it is a contradiction to Rav Huna, and now we're using it to try and support Rav Yehuda. But of course, yesterday we were unsuccessful in using it as a support, as a contradiction to Rav Huna. So of course today we will be unsuccessful in using it as support for Rav Yehuda. So what was the case? That when the Yevamot, when the widow dies, she, the brothers are permitted to her sister. What is the implication? Ba'achosa in the ima lo. The implication is that only this is true for the sister, but not for the mother. So that would imply that Rav Yehuda was correct. No, that is not a good proof. Hu hadinda filo be'iman. Really, the truth is that even it might be that that according to that Mishnah, even the Yevamah's mother is permitted after the death of the Yevamah, after the death of the widow. But Aidi the Tana Reisha, and because the first part of that Mishnah, what is it talking about? It's talking about Ishto Shemeso Mutar Ba'achosa, that if the wife dies, then you're allowed to marry the sister. Well, that is Dafka Ba'achosa, lo be'ima lo, right? Because if that only is true in connection with a sister, meaning that if Reuven is married to Rachel and Rachel dies, Reuven is allowed to marry Leah, her sister. But if Reuven is married to Rachel and Rachel dies, he still cannot marry Sarah, Rachel's mom. So as a result, that is not going to work. And so as a result, because the beginning of the Mishnah had to talk about the sister, so we'll talk about the Havila Isura de Oraisa, because when it comes to the mother, it's a prohibition from the Torah. So Taninam Seva Mutar Ba'achosa. So in the Seifa also, we talked about the case of the sister and not the case of the mother, even though it is true in connection with the mother as well. So that Mishnah is not, in fact, the definitive proof for Rav Yehuda. So Mesiv Rav Huna Bar Chia. So now Rav Huna Bar Chia challenges Rav Yehuda's statement. Asaba Ma'amar Umes. Now, what about our Mishnah, right? Our Mishnah said that, and let's remind ourselves what our Mishnah said, right? The Mishnah dealt with a non-contemporary brother. So what was the case? Initially, Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Reuven marries Rachel, but he dies without children. Shimon marries Shira and performs Yibum with Rachel. And if Levi is now born, then if Shimon dies without children, Levi cannot marry either Rachel or Shira, right? He can't, but if Shimon has only done Mamar with Rachel, then we said in our Mishnah that Levi has to perform Chalitza with Shira. The implication is that if there is only a Zika relationship between Shimon and Rachel, then Levi can still perform Yibum with Shira. So that seems to contradict Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says that the Zika relationship is a strong one. So why would Levi be allowed to perform Yibum with Shira if he had a Zika relationship with Rachel? So let's take a look and see. So again, also Ma'amar Umeis, if Shimon only has done Ma'amar with Reuven's widow and Rachel, and now he dies without children, Shniya Choletzes v'lo misyabemes, right? So Levi, who was not alive when Reuven was alive, but was alive when Shimon was alive, he now needs to do Chalitza with Shimon's wife Shira, and she's not allowed to take her in Yibum. Why? Because Shimon had done a Mamar relationship with Rachel. Rachel is an erva to Levi because it's the wife of a non-contemporary brother, and so as a result, effectively now, at least rabbinically, Shira is like Rachel's co-wife, and just as as Levi is prohibited to marry an erva, we know, namely a wife of a non-contemporary brother, we know that Levi is not allowed to marry the wife, the co-wife of the wife of a non-contemporary brother. So he's not allowed to marry. Shira either, and so that's why he can't do Yibum. So Taima de Avad V'Mamar. The reason is that we have this additional prohibition of Levi not being able to do Yibum with Shimon's wife Shira is because Shimon performed Mamar with Reuven's widow. Hello, Avid B'Mamar. If he had not, Shniya Nami Yibume Yaba. Then the implication is that Levi would have been able to actually do Yibum with Shimon's wife Shira. The Amrat Yesh Zika, but if you say that there should actually be Zika, that the Zika should be powerful enough to consider Shira to be like the co-wife of the Achiv Shelo Hayabo Olamo Bezika. Through the Zika, the Shimon's wife Shira should be considered like the co-wife of Reuven's widow Rachel. So Amarabba Hu Hadin. Actually, even though the Mishnah it might imply what you just said, actually the same law applies. The truth is that at least for Rav Yehuda's understanding of our Mishnah, that even if Shimon had not done Ma'amar at all with Reuven's wife Rachel, with Reuven's widow Rachel, but rather had just had the Zika relationship, Levi still would not be allowed to Yibum with Shimon's wife Shira if Shimon were to die without any children before performing Yibum, Mamar, or Chalitza with Reuven's widow Rachel. So as a result, therefore that Mishnah, our Mishnah, is not in fact contradictory to Rav Yehuda. Well, okay, but if that's true, meaning why not teach the greater thing of saying that even if there was no Mamar, there would be a relationship that would prohibit Levi from doing Yibum with Shira. So La'apuke Beis Shammai, the reason is to show that we do not hold like Beis Shammai, because what does Beis Shammai say? Da'amri Mamar Kona Kinyan Gomer, because Beis Shammai says that Mamar, and recall that Mamar is this rabbinic concept, at least we just generally understand it as a rabbinic concept that is a first step to performing Yibum, that involves saying that you're going to do the Yibum to the person. And so as a result, now it's like almost like the engagement period of kedushin in connection with a regular wife. But Beis Shammai says that mamar affects creates the yibum, and so it's as if they were married. So according to Beis Shammai, then if using that logic, right, to Amar because he says it would be a complete kinyan, and so as a result, according to Shimon, according to Beis Shammai's attitude, if in fact Shimon does mamar with Reuven's widow Rachel, well then not only can't Levi marry Shira because of that relationship, but there isn't even an aspect, assuming that we're holding according to a view that says that there are co-wives, that there's an issue of co-wives, then Levi would not even be allowed to do Yibum or Chalitza with Shira, because as a co-wife of the wife of a brother who didn't live at the same time as Levi, so then as a result, based on the first Mishnah, the 14th case in the first Mishnah, so as a result, Levi will not be able to do Yibum or Chalitza with any of Shimon's wives, because the Ma'amar made all of Shimon's wives co-wives of somebody with an erva relationship. So Kamash Malan, in order to teach us that the halacha is not like Beis Shammai in this aspect, so therefore we would say that there's that we're talking about the Ma'amar situation, that even after Ma'amar there is a requirement for Chalitza, and the Ma'amar does not create effectively a Yibum situation, and so as a result, that is why our Mishnah references Ma'amar, even though the same halacha would be true according to Rav Yehuda in a case where there was no Ma'amar done, where Shimon had done nothing to effectuate his relationship with Rachel, because just having the Zika relationship is sufficient, because Rav Yehuda says Yesh Zika. Okay, so now that was challenge number one. Challenge number two, Eisvei Abaye, or maybe that was challenge number two. And now we have another challenge. Abaye challenges and says the following. We have a brisa. Shnei achim ba'olam echad. We have two brothers who live at the same time in one world, so that they're living at the same time. Umeis echad mehen below vlad. And now one of them dies without any children. Of course, we'll say that that's Reuven, who dies without any children, and he leaves his widow Rachel. Va'amar hasheni hazeh lazos ma'amar b'imto. And then Shimon gets up in order to do ma'amar. Below his speak lasos ma'amar, but before he has even a chance to do ma'amar, achenola lo ach umes. He has a new brother, Levi, and Levi is born. So again, what's the order? We have Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Reuven marries Rachel, and we'll say Shimon's married to Shira. And now Reuven dies, and before Shimon can do anything, Levi is born. Now what happens? So but now Levi is born, and again, before Shimon was able to do anything, Shimon now dies. So now we have two. What do we have? We have Shimon is married to Shira. So now Shimon's widow Shira is poised to do for Yibum. She's a Yevamot for Levi. And we have Reuven's widow Rachel, who is the wife of a brother who was not alive at the same time as Levi. So Levi's not allowed to marry her. So Harishona, so Reuven's widow Rachel, what about her? We say in this brisa that there's no concept of yibum for her because she's a wife of a non-contemporary brother. Ushniya. And what about Shira, the second wife, the second widow, the widow of Shimon? Okoletzes omis yabemes. Oh, you could do either, according to this brisa, Levi can do either chalitza or yibum. So now we pose the question, we close the loop of the question. So Rabbi Yehuda, you said yesh zika. So if there's zika, so then it doesn't make a difference whether Shimon actually did mamar or not. There's a zika relationship, and as we saw in our explanation of our Mishnah, that should mean that the co-wife of the zika relationship, that the person becomes a co-wife, that the current wife becomes a co-wife of the one with the zika relationship, meaning that Shira becomes Rachel's co-wife. And so if Shira is Rachel's co-wife, well, then Levi shouldn't be able to marry Shira or Rachel, because he can't marry Rachel because Rachel is a wife of a non-contemporary brother, and he can't marry Shira because Shira is the co-wife of a wife of a non-contemporary brother. So as a result, how could we have this brisa according to Rav Yehuda? This brisa seems to contradict Rav Yehuda. So high money, who is this brisa? Rabbi Meir. So the answer is that this brisa is a different Tana. This is the Tana Rabbi Meir. So Amar Ein Zika, and he's a Tana who says Ein Zika. 1 second, Abaye says, Rabbi Meir Ein Zika. Is it really true that Rabbi Meir says Ein Zika? What about the following Mishnah, the Mishnah that we're going to learn in about a week? I guess it's next Shabbos. So Arba Achim, if you have 4 brothers, and you have 2 of them married to 2 sisters. So Reuben and Shimon are married to Rachel and Leah, who are sisters. And now the 2 brothers, Reuben and Shimon, both die without children. So now Levi and Yehuda, they could potentially marry those 2 sisters. Each of them could marry one of the sisters, but we say no, because the sisters are not allowed to be married to the same person. We say that they are not allowed to be taken in Yibum. The Rabbi Meir ain't Zika. Now, if you say that there's no Zika, Hane mitre bate ka'asin. Let the 2 women make 2 separate houses. Let Levi marry Leah and Yehuda marry Rachel. So highly yabim chada, but highly yabim chada. Let each of them marry one of them, and everything will be wonderful. So la'olam. So doesn't that show that there's that Rabbi Meir in this unattributed Mishnah? So the unattributed Mishnahs are according to Rabbi Meir. Usually we say Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir. So la'olam ain zika. So now we answer it and say no. In fact, that's not a proof of Rabbi Meir holding Zika, because really Rabbi Meir says ain Zika. And why is it that the 2 sisters who are widows are not allowed to marry the 2 brothers? Because there is a general prohibition about the possibility of negating the mitzvah of Yibum. Well, how does that happen? How is it possible that this would negate the mitzvah of Yibum? So maybe when Levi marries Leah, Yehuda dies. And so now Yehuda never had the chance to marry Rachel. And so as a result, Yibum and Chalitza will never happen to either of to Rachel. So Leah might, but Rachel gets left out in the cold. And now because Rachel's sister Leah is married to Levi, there's no possibility of doing Yibum or Chalitza with Rachel, because you're not allowed to do Yibum or Chalitza with the sister of your wife. If Reuven and Levi marry Rachel and Leah, and Reuven dies, and Rachel and Leah are siblings, so then Rachel just goes free. And if those are the only 2 siblings, there's no Yibum or Chalitza required. And so in this case, where the Reuven and Shimon died and left Rachel and Leah to marry Yehuda and Levi, well, now if Yehuda dies before he marries Rachel, and Levi has already married Leah, well, then there will be neither Yibum nor Chalitza for either for Rachel, and so she will be stuck. And we want to not the kabbalas mitzvahs Yevamot. And as a result of that possible situation, where after Levi marries Leah, Yehuda dies, and so no one is able to do either Yibum or Chalitza with Rachel. So as a result, we are going to say we're not going to allow Levi to marry Leah. Instead, we will have Levi and Yehuda perform Chalitza with both wives. One second. Zika Tibato. 1 second. If you're in fact saying in that situation, right? So now we've said that in fact that Rabbi Meir says Ein Zika, and he's saying that we don't want to negate the mitzvah of Yibum. But Abaye now responds and says, 1 second, if in fact you're saying Ein Zika, it should be okay to nullify the mitzvah of Yibum. Why? Daha Rabban Gamliel Amar Ein Zika, because we also know that Rabban Gamliel says Ein Zika, and he says Umuter Levatal Mitzvah Yivamin, and he allows us to negate the mitzvah of Yibum. Why? What's the situation? D'Tanan, we'll learn in a Mishnah in a couple of months on Daf Kuf Teram and Aleph, where and so let me give you the introduction to the Mishnah. The introduction to the Mishnah is that you have two brothers, again married to two sisters. One of the brothers' wives is an adult whose marriage is obviously therefore biblically valid, and the other brother is married to an orphan minor. So we have Rachel and Leah. Reuben's married to Rachel. Shimon is married to Leah, and Leah is a minor. Her father had died before she became an adult, and while she's a minor, her brothers and mother marry her off. And so as a result, since they married her off, that marriage is only a rabbinic marriage. And she has the right, until she becomes an adult, to say, I don't want to stay in this marriage. And so what happens when you have, again, Reuben is married to Rachel, the adult, Shimon is married to Leah, the minor, and now Reuben dies. And it's only these two brothers. And so now Shimon is stuck, because Shimon has a rabbinic marriage to Leah because she's a minor, and he has the possibility of doing Yibum with Leah's older sister, Rachel. So what's going to happen? He can't do Yibum because he can't marry her. And maybe he's not even supposed to be doing Chalitza because she's his wife's sister. And so there's a very a confusing situation. So the first opinion in that Mishnah, Rabbi Lazar, says that we convinced the minor, we convinced Leah, Shimon's wife, to say, I don't want to be married to you anymore. And so that way, Shimon will be able to marry through Yibum Rachel, the older sister. But we're going to see now Rabbi Gamliel's position. Rabbi Gamliel, in that situation, Omer, im me'ana, if Leah wants to say that she doesn't want to be married to Shimon any longer, me'ana, that's fine. She can refuse, and then Shimon can do Yibum or Chalitza with Reuven's widow, Rachel, and the sister of his former wife, Leah. But the im lo me'ana, if Leah does not want to refuse Shimon, tamtin ad shetagdil, then we just wait until she grows up. And the teitze helazu mishum achos isha. And if, in fact, she grows up and stays married to Shimon, then Shimon will be now married fully to Leah, And now, because that marriage is now a biblical marriage, and when a sister comes to a brother, when a sister of a wife comes to that the brother who's married to that wife, so then we say that there's no yibum and no chalitza, and so Rachel will be able to go out and marry whomever she wants. So what did we just see happen here? We just saw that Rabban Gamliel allows for the nullification of the mitzvah of yibum, because he could have said, like Rabbi Lazar, that forcing the Leah to effectively nullify her marriage to Shimon. And if she nullified her marriage to Shimon, then Shimon would be able to do Yibum or Chalitza with Rachel. But instead, we allow the two of them to continue their marriage until Leah grows up. And the result is that potentially now there will be no marriage. There will be no Yibum. There will be no Chalitza. We're going to nullify the mitzvah completely of Yibum and Chalitza to Leah. So Amar Lei, so Rabbah responds that, you know what, this is not a problem for me. The Rabban Gamliel, the Reb Meir Karamis, they're two different opinions. Yes, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Gamliel both hold Ein Zika, but Rabbi Gamliel says that there's a problem. Rabbi Gamliel says that there's no problem with nullifying Yibum, and Rabbi Meir says that there is a problem with nullifying Yibum. And so Abaye responds back, Lo, Hakikamrinan, this is what I'm trying to tell you. Rabbi Meir, Chayash afilu l'sveika, Rabbi Gamliel afilu levade lo chayash. The what's so striking about these two concerns, about the fact that Rabbi Meir is concerned and that Rabbi Gamliel is not concerned, is that Rabbi Gamliel is not concerned in a situation where we know it's going to happen. We know there's going to be nullification. If Leah grows up and stays married to Shimon, Shimon won't be able to do Yibum or Chalitza with Leah. With Rachel. Again, if Leah grows up and remains married to Shimon, Shimon will not be able to do Yibum or Chalitza with Rachel, the widow of Ruvain, because he can't. You're not allowed to do Yibum or Chalitza with your wife's sister. And so there's a certainty that there will be nullification in the Rabban Gamliel situation. However, in Rabbi Meir's, and yet he allows that. And yet Rabbi Meir says that even if it's only a possibility, we're not going to allow, again, in the case that Rabbi Meir was talking about, where two brothers are married to two sisters, the two brothers die without children, and now the two sisters come to the next two brothers and could potentially marry them. And yet Rabbi Meir says we're not going to allow either of the brothers to marry either of these widows, because we're worried that the other brother will die and that will nullify the mitzvah of Yibum with respect to the remaining sister. Well, that's only a possibility. There's no guarantee that that the other brother is going to die. Most likely the other brother will be fine. And yet just that possibility is what's causing Rabbi Meir to have the concern. So that's the issue that we're faced with. So how are we going to deal with that? So that's what Abaye is trying to explain. So the Rabbah answers, you know what? Yes, you're absolutely right that there's a big difference between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Meir. But Dilma mandalo chayesh afilu levade lo chayesh. Manda chayesh afilu l'sveika chayesh. That maybe it really is that the issue is, once you're concerned about the nullification of Yibum, you're concerned about it in all situations, whether it's a Vade situation or a suffix situation. And once you're not concerned about the negation of Yibum, then you're not concerned about it, even if it's in a definite situation. So that, therefore, Rabbah says, you have not proved me wrong. So therefore, we are still have, now we've got two good cases. We've got Rav Yehuda on the one side, and we've got Rav Huna on the other side. And so what's the debate? Again, Rav Huna, in the name of Rav, says Ein Zika. Rav Yehuda says Yesh Zika. And now we know that Rav Yehuda was a student of Rav and Shmuel. And so the Gemara wants to understand how Rav Yehuda came to his position. So let's take a look. So Amarle Abaye Rav Yosef. Abaye asked Rav Yosef, "How did Rav Yehuda Shmuel?" I think that the Rav Yehuda is actually conveying the position of Shmuel. How do I know that? Tanan, and now we turn to Yechet Amabet. Shomeris Yavam. If a woman is waiting to have Yibum done to her, Shekidish Achiv Es Achosa, and his brother, who was a potential, the brother of the deceased, who was a potential person to do Yavam, ends up doing Kedushin, doing Irisin with his with the sister of his brother's widow. So again, Reuven is married to Rachel. Reuven dies without any children. Shimon now has the possibility of doing Yibum with Rachel. But before he does the Yibum, he does Kedushin with Rachel's sister Leah. So Mishum Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Amru. So according in the name of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, what they say, Omrimlo, we tell Shimon, Hamtain achiyasa achicha masa. Wait for one of your other brothers, for Yehuda or Levi, who are other brothers who could marry, who could do Yibum or Chalitza with Rachel, Reuven's widow. Wait for them to do their act, and then you can complete your marriage. So basically, we're not going to let you complete your marriage until the Yibum status, for the other sisters, has been resolved. Amar Shmuel, and now here's our proof that Shmuel is going to be like Rabbi Yehuda. Halacha to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, that the halacha is like the Tana Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. So what do we see? Why is that? Why is there? Because what's the problem? The problem is that there must be a Zika relationship between Shimon and Rachel and the widow Rachel. And that is why we will not let Shimon complete his marriage to Leah, Rachel's sister. Because if we allow him to complete his marriage to Rachel, Leah's sister, well, then effectively he has married the sister of somebody he has a Zika relationship with. And so it must be that Rabbi Yehuda is like Shmuel. And Shmuel, because Shmuel is holding like Rabbi Yehuda. So Amar Lei, Rabbi Yosef says, no, it's not a good proof. De'idu Rav Mai. One second, maybe it could be like Rav. So Kasha de Rav, a second. Hold on just a second. How do you know that it's not like Rav, right? Maybe it's like, maybe in fact, Rabbi Yehuda is like Rav. Well, 1 second. Kasha de Rav ad Rav is your concern because we said that Rav Huna said that in the name of Rav that the halacha was ein zika. So you're going to use that as your basis to say that it can't be that Rav Yehuda is holding like Rav because Rav Huna says in the name of Rav ein zika. Well, Dilma Amorai Ninhu Baliba de Rav. Maybe there is actually an argument about what Rav says. So Abaye explains, no. Since there was an explicit statement of Shmuel that shows that there is Zika, umishmei de Rav Amorai, whereas if you say that it was if you say that Rabbi Yehuda was thinking like Rav, it would mean that there would be an Amoraic dispute among people in the name of Rav. Lo shavkinan mishmei de Shmuel behedja umakminan ka'amorai la'aliba de Rav. It doesn't make any sense to say that really there's an argument in what Rav says when there's a clear statement that Shmuel could be consistent with Rabbi Yehuda. So again, Rabbi Yehuda says yesh zika. Rav Huna in the name of Rav says ein zika. We have another statement of Shmuel that shows yesh zika. So as a result, let's align Rav Yehuda with Shmuel rather than saying that there's an argument about what Rav says. And so that's the way the Gemara ends on this point. So we've shown that Rabbi Yehuda would hold like Shmuel. So Amar Rav Kahana said, now we're going to sort of like support this same point. Amrisa l'shmaita kamei de Rav Zvid minaharda. When I told this over to Rav Zvid from Narda, Amar, he told me, Atun haki masnisula. You taught it this way, namely that it must be that Rav Yehuda is in the name of Shmuel because it aligns better with Shmuel than it aligns with Rav. Anan behenjin masnisnan. But I learned this explicitly. What did I learn? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. That when Rabbi Yehuda made his statement about Yesh Zika, he said it in the name of Shmuel. And what did he say? Shomeres Yavam, Shemesa Asar Be'ima, that when a woman who's awaiting Yibum dies, then her mother is forbidden to the brothers. So Alma Kasavar Yesh Zika. So we see that in fact there is Zika. And again, it's not just Rabbi Yehuda that says it now, it's Shmuel. And in fact, Shmuel follows his own reasoning because we had the statement in connection with the brisa that we quoted a few moments ago that Rabbi Yehuda, that Shmuel says that Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana, of course we have to be careful because there's a Tana, there are multiple Tanaim Rabbi Yehuda, and whereas there's a Rav Yehuda, which is an Amora. So that the Shmuel has said that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, the Tana. So utzriche, and we need to teach us both rulings. We need to teach both that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, and we need to teach that the halacha is that that if a widow dies, the brothers cannot marry her mother. Why? We need to teach us both that there's yesh zika, because why? Because if I just said yesh zika hava amina hani mili bechad, I might have thought that that's only where there's one brother. Aval b'srei lo, but when there are two brothers, I would not say that kamash malan. So that's why I needed to tell us both that there's about the situation of the mother and the mother-in-law. I'm sorry, the widow and the mother That even if the widow dies without anything happening, the brothers are not allowed to marry the widow's mother. And I need to say yesh zika, because if I had just said yesh zika, I might have thought that the yesh zika is only where there's one brother, when there's that close connection, because there's only one brother who could potentially do yibum or chalitza. But when there are multiple brothers, I might have said, no, there isn't that close connection, and we would say ein zika. So kamash malan, that yesh zika applies even when there is more than one brother remaining. The iyashmin halacha Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. And if I were to just tell you that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, so haba amina hani mili mechayim, I would have thought that was only when the widow is alive. But I might have thought that once the woman died, then she would the zika relationship would go away. So kamash malan de zika b'chtei lo haka, that even in that situation that the zika relationship does not go away, and so as a result, even after the widow dies, the brothers are not allowed to marry her mother. Okay, so that brings us now to the next Mishnah. And so in the next Mishnah, we're going to also discuss a non-contemporary brother. However, while the previous Mishnah mentioned Levi being born after Reuven died, but before Shimon married Rachel, now Levi is born after Shimon marries Rachel. So again, Reuven was married to Rachel. Reuven dies without children. And now, instead of Levi being born right now, before Shimon had a chance to marry Rachel, now Levi is born after Shimon marries Rachel. So we'll see that in more detail right now. So Shnei Achen umeis echa mehem. We have two brothers, Reuven and Shimon, and one of them dies, namely Reuven. And now Shimon takes his brother's wife Rachel and marries her in Yibum. And now a third brother, Levi, is born to them. Umeis. And now Shimon dies without children. Harishonah. When it comes to Reuven's widow, Rachel, she goes out and there's no chalitza necessary because she's the wife of a non-contemporary brother. V'hashniya, and with respect to Shimon's own wife, Mishum Sarasa, she goes out and there's no opportunity to do Yibum or Chalitza because she is the co-wife. So Asaba Mamar Umes, but if Shimon had only done Mamar, Hashniya Choletzes V'lo Misyabemes, the second one, namely Shimon's widow, would require Chalitza, but is not allowed to be taken in Yibum because there is some kind of relationship there's a deeper relationship between Shimon and Rachel. And Rabbi Shimon says, no, we're wrong about that. Once, when Levi is born, after Shimon has taken Reuven's widow Rachel as in Yibum, so now it's as if that's a new relationship. And so now Levi, he's allowed to marry whomever he wants. Or he can do chalitza with whichever one he wants. There is no prohibition of a wife of a non-contemporary brother if that wife is already married to somebody else when the new brother is born. Okay, that's the position of Rabbi Shimon. So Amar Rabbi Oshia. Now Rabbi Oshia explains that this disagreement between Rabbi Shimon and the Tanna Kama exists not only in our case where Levi is born after Shimon marries Rachel, but even in the case where Levi is born before Shimon marries Rachel. Of course, he's born after Levi dies. That's why he's a non-contemporary brother. But after Levi dies, but before Shimon marries Rachel, even in that situation, Rabbi Shimon would disagree. So Chaluk Haya Rabbi Shimon Afarishana. Even in that first case, even where Levi was born before Reuven's widow was taken in Yibum by Shimon. Mimai, how do I know this? Miviktani Mishnah Yisera, because really the Mishnah did not need to teach us the two different cases. The case of Levi being born before and the case of Levi being born after. So Bava Deresha, what's the first case? Laman Katanila, who's teaching it? So Elam and the Rabbanan, if you say that it's the rabbis, Hashta Yibim Blu Sof Nolad. The second case is a bigger point. Let's just teach about it in the second case. The key Ashkache, Betera Ashkache, because if Levi's born after Shimon has married Rachel, well then he's meeting her in a permitted state. She's married to somebody else. Asrei Rabbanan, and yet their rabbis say that it's prohibited. Nolad ba'achar kach yibim, if he was born before, and if he was born before Shimon performed yibum, when the woman is prohibited to anybody, she's not allowed to marry anyone. So of course, mi boy, would you need to even stay it? Elalab l'Rabbi Shimon itzrich. Rather, the reason that we need to say that first statement is to tell us that even in that case, Rabbi Shimon is disagreeing. The Tanaresha lo dodiacha kocha the Rabbi Shimon, and we were taught the first case to tell us that Rabbi Shimon is even disagreeing in that situation. The Tanaseifa lo dodiacha kocha the Rabbanan, and we taught the second case, the case of Levi being born after Shimon takes Rachel in Yibum, in order to tell us the power of the rabbis. Uvedin who deniflog Rabbi Shimon Beresha. And really, we should have said that Rabbi Shimon disagreed after telling us the first case in the first Mishnah, Elanatar Lahula Rabbanan Ad the Misaimo Lamilsaihu. But really, these Mishnahs are all part of one statement, and we wanted to let the rabbis finish talking. They wanted to say both of their statements, Vahadar Poligalayu, and then they comes to disagree. So Ella Ashes Achiv Shalo Haya Ba'olamo. So in second, there is a prohibition of a non-contemporary brother, of the wife of a non-contemporary brother. Rabbi Shimon, what's the situation? So two possible situations. If there was only one brother, only Reuven was alive, and now Reuven was married to Rachel, and now Reuven dies without children, and now after Reuven died without children, and has no brothers. Now, Levi is born. Now, in that situation, Levi is never allowed to marry Rachel. So that's the situation of the non-contemporary brother. So Bechad Achiv Umes, V'Noah Loach, and now after the death of Reuven, the Levi is born. So Inami, or you could say, betray the two that where there are two brothers, the Lo Yibim, V'Lo Mis. And we're talking about a situation when the second brother Shimon has neither done Yibum nor has not died. So while the widow is awaiting Yibum, so now Levi is born. So again, Reuven married Rachel. Reuven dies. Reuven's brother Shimon is alive already, and now Shimon has the possibility of doing Yibum to Rachel. But before he does so, Levi is born. As long as Shimon has not done Yibum to Rachel, has not, and is still alive, there is no permission for Levi to marry Rachel. And so that's the other situation where we could have a wife of a non-contemporary brother situation, and that would be prohibited even according to Rabbi Shimon. So now we're going to understand our Mishnah. It makes sense to talk about where the second case of the most recent Mishnah, which has our second case, and that is the case of where Shimon performs Yibum and then Levi is born. So because when Levi encounters that the widow Rachel, she's already allowed to be married, meaning she's married to Shimon. So Ella Nola v'achakach Yibim. But in the situation that we mentioned in the first Mishnah of our parak, where Levi was born and then Shimon performs Yibum, my time up. What's the reason that that Rabbi Shimon would permit the person to marry Levi? How can the widow ever be permitted? So this is a question according to Rabbi Oshia. How could you have that say? How could that be allowed? So kashavar yesh sika. So Rabbi Shimon thinks that there's yesh sika, the zika k'nesua damya, and so as a result, the reason that according to Rabbi Oshia, Rabbi Shimon would disagree even in the situation where Levi was born and then Shimon performs Yibum. The reason and the reason that Levi would allow, the reason that Rabbi Shimon would allow Levi to now, after Shimon dies without children, to marry, to do Yibum with either of Shimon's wives. The reason is because we're going to consider, because when Levi was born, Shimon already had a Zika relationship with Reuven's widow Rachel. We'll treat that like Shimon was already married to Rachel, and so as a result, even in that situation, it's as if Levi was born when Rachel was in a permitted state, and so as a result, we can allow Levi to perform Yibum and Chalitza with Shimon's widows, or with either of Shimon's widows, even when Shimon only performed Yibum with Reuven's widow after Levi was born. And so as a result, there is no question, according to Rabbi Oshia, about how Rabbi Shimon permit the widow Levi to marry in both situations. And so now so tomorrow we're going to begin an extended challenge that Rav Yosef will present to this understanding, and then we'll present the view of Rav Papa, which conflicts with Rav Oshia. And we saw that a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, we saw that Rav Oshia will eventually be rebutted. And so, God willing, we will see all of that tomorrow. Have a wonderful Shabbos.